Okay, I see people filtering in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Student Data Corps Data Science Career Panel Series. We're so excited that you all could join in for this month's career panel. You'll be hearing from three amazing panelists on their data science journeys within their own respective careers and beyond, as well as receiving some tangible advice and insights regarding how you can leverage data science in your own journeys. So just sit tight. We'll be starting promptly at 3 p.m. Eastern, so in 4 minutes. So hi, everyone. For those of you filtering in, welcome to the National Student Data Corps Data Science Career Panel series. We will be starting in 1 minute, so just hold on tight and we'll be starting promptly at 3 p.m. Okay, so it is now 3 p.m. Eastern. We will officially be starting the event now. Again, welcome to the National Student Data Corps Data Science Career Panel. My name's Haley. I'm a senior undergrad at Columbia University and project coordinator of the NSCC. And my co-moderator today is Benjamin Sango, who's also a senior undergrad at Columbia University and one of our amazing student leaders of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub and the NSCC. So Benji and I have a lot in store for you all today, as you'll be hearing from our three panelists, Yoni Malchi, Asia Spears, and Brandon Sepulvado. We also have another student leader, Pritika, who will be facilitating the post-panel Q&A session with Benji, and no other than Lauren, the Hub's operations manager, who is controlling the slides and live streaming this event for everyone across the world to tune in. So let's just start with today's agenda. So first, I'll be giving a brief overview of the National Student Data Corps that is a part of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. Then some important announcements regarding the NSDC, specifically what the N in NSDC now represents. You'll also hear about resources you can access via our website, more information on the NSDC chapters program, and Lauren will then discuss a new job opportunity at the NSDC. And then we'll get into the thick of the event, the panel discussion itself, that'll be moderated by Benji. Finally, for the last 30 minutes of the event, we'll have an open Q&A discussion when Benji and Pritika will announce any questions that you all have for the panelists for them to answer. So make sure to really use the Q&A chat box with any questions you have as you hear more from the panelists today. Okay, so the National Student Data Corps is led by the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub, which is a community convener. We like to consider ourselves a collaboration hub because we create and enable a network designed to fuel data science innovation through diverse and inclusive community partnerships with academia, higher ed, K through 12, STEM programs, industry, nonprofit, really anyone who wants to be a part of a network of people in data science across the country and the world. So as you can see illustrated, the hub has 4 main focus areas. So we have education and data literacy, health, urban to rural communities, and responsible data science, security, privacy, and ethics. The NSDC is the premier program under education and data literacy. So it's events like this that really push that mission forward to create a community that cultivates data education and literacy. So you can access more information on each of these focus areas and their corresponding activities on our website, nebigdatahub.org/about. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the NSDC is created as a community developed initiative. We really wanted to foster a diverse data science community that started with the students and educators of data science. So last year we had over 20 people interested in creating the foundation of the NSDC, which includes researchers, professors, folks from industry, nonprofits, undergrad, and grad students. And they happen to make up the founding committee, all the faces you see on the screen, the people who really helped build this program from the ground up. And we organize the work done through the NSDC through 3 different teams. So we have content pedagogy, which helps to build a curriculum leveraging academia and industry-generated resources and materials to teach data science fundamentals. From their great work, we now have Learners and Educators Central that I'll discuss more in later slides. We have the peer instructors team, which consists of graduate, undergrads, and postdoc students, as well as professors who mentor and enable data science learning remotely for students who don't have access to these kinds of programs. So they play a big role in shaping the students' experiences. And then we have the outreach team, which identifies collaborators interested in engaging the NSDC to increase data science education and knowledge. So this includes higher ed institutions, students interested in engaging with the NSDC, and government institutions that provide real world data science applications to teach really practical translational skills. Plus, the outreach team is also responsible for the data science career panel series. So we'd like to thank all these teams and the founding committee as a whole for their leadership and great work. And you can find more information about this at nebigdatahub.org/NSDC. Okay, so the national and NSDC. So we are very pleased to announce that the NSDC has been rebranded as the National Student Data Corps. The NSDC community has grown to include 1,700 individuals from 278 institutions and representing the US and 7 other countries, as you can see on this global map, which includes Australia, Germany, India, Lebanon, Netherlands, Turkey, and United Arab Emirates. So please share the NSDC with friends and colleagues around the world because everyone is welcome to join. All right, so there are a couple ways that you can use the NSDC. So first we have Learner Central, like I mentioned earlier, where you can find resources that cover data science fundamentals for students of all ages. So this content is organized by difficulty level. So you can start with basics or jump into ethics and practical applications. You can learn more about supervised machine learning, as well as R and Python. We're always looking for new content to add to Learner Central portal, and we plan to grow this section of the NSDC in the near future. Similarly, we have a portal called Educator Central, where teachers at all levels can find a range of valuable materials to develop or extend a data science program. So we've included videos, presentations, lecture notes, code examples from places like IBM, UC Berkeley, MIT, Columbia University, and City University of New York, Queensborough Community College. The list really goes on, and other organizations that really help teachers build a comprehensive data science curriculum for students. And in the middle here is a screenshot of our video library, which has videos recorded by data science students using the IBM OpenDS for All GitHub content, as well as SQL educational materials created by student volunteers. Great. So we also have free online resources for chapter development and career development. So for students interested in data science, but not really sure the steps you can take to advance your career, there's Career Central. So here we kind of point students to job search websites specifically for data science. And we also provide guidance on how to prepare for interviews, polish your resume, or even practice technical and behavioral interview skills. Then there's Chapter Central, which has all the information about our chapter program. So chapters are local student-led communities specific to different regions across the country and now across the world. So finally, we have so we can go on to Volunteer Central because I'll be speaking a bit more about NSTC chapters in a later slide. But our volunteers are at the core of the NSTC. So the Northeast Big Data Hub has a program called Real Volunteers, which is a group of students who donate their time and skills to our programming and content development. The Real program, or Research Experience and Leadership program, offers volunteer opportunities to facilitate online events, take notes, curate resources, and more while learning about data science and its real-world applications. And in fact, Pritika is a student volunteer from Rider University who is with us today, facilitating the Q&A later. So if you want to engage in any of these activities, please apply online to contribute to the NSTC. Okay, so now we can talk about starting or joining an NSTC chapter. So a bit more information about this. Chapters extend the mission of the NSTC by creating a community of support for their members, extending it through local community development initiatives for underserved and underrepresented learners in data science. So they provide them with mentorship, research, and career opportunities. And the four main objectives are education, community development, project-based collaboration, and internships and career opportunities. So all in all, it's really an opportunity to cultivate a support system for learners of all ages and backgrounds. The NSTC has actually received a lot of interest in beginning or joining local chapters for 30 students and professors across 27 colleges and universities spanning 15 states in the US and one foreign country, which is Ghana. So please email us if you know anyone interested in joining this program, or go on to anybigdatahub.org/NSTC where you can find more information and fill out our NSTC chapter's interest form. So now I'd like to pass this off to Lauren so she can tell you more about our new job opportunity.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people from all over the world joining in on our call today. I'm going to interrupt Haley for just 1 second to introduce all of you to a new opportunity that we have at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. We're currently hiring and looking for an NSTC program coordinator. We encourage anybody who's interested in joining our fantastic team to apply. You can find more information at the link provided here or scan the QR code. This is a full-time position for someone who's really interested in helping our community grow and thrive. So please reach out if you have any thoughts or questions, and we hope that you'll consider throwing your hat in and applying to join our team.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. Okay, so now we'd like to get into the breadth of the event. So meet today's panelists, these great faces you see on the screen. So today we have Yoni Malchi. He's Managing Director and Head of Artificial Intelligence Research at Worldwide Technology. We have Asia Spears, doctoral candidate at Pardee Rand Graduate School and Chief Encouraging Officer at Rose Data Studio. And finally, we have Brandon Sepulvado, data scientist at NORC at the University of Chicago. So now I'd like to virtually hand the mic off to my co-moderator, Benji, so we can start the panel discussion. And Lauren, feel free to stop sharing your screen so we can see all the faces of the panelists and moderators. Oh, Benji, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you got
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction again, Haley, and a big thank you to today's panelists for joining us to share their experiences in data science with us. So we have a set of questions that we would like to ask our panelists so that they get a chance to share their experiences with us, as I mentioned earlier. And for the first question, each panelist would have 3 minutes to answer their question, and I'll start with Yoni for this question. So Yoni, can you please tell us about your journey and what excites you about data science the most?
Sure, thanks for having me. So I took somewhat of an unorthodox journey, although I think many people come to data science from that same perspective. I got my degree in mechanical engineering, PhD in mechanical engineering from Penn State, and then I went and worked in the aerospace industry for a number of years. After a couple of years in there, I decided I needed a career change and found data science consulting as a way for me to kind of spread my wings, try a couple of new things, and still maintain the ability to work with people in the math and sciences space, but applying it to business. So that's really the crux of it. I ended up getting a job at a company called Opera Solutions, which was a management consulting firm that focused on bringing data science to large organizations. And from there, I've worked at a couple other companies doing very similar things, currently at Worldwide Technology. And before that, I was at JP Morgan in the city. So what excites me about data science? I personally love that it is a horizontal capability that really any industry can benefit from. And there's so much innovation going on in the space right now that you talk to any company, any executive, anyone that is doing anything in the business world, they're all thinking about how they can apply data science somewhere. So lots of room to run, lots of value to be created, and you got to be creative, be able to think creatively and mathematically.
Fantastic. So thanks, Yoni, for sharing with us. So our next panelist would be Asya.
Hi, thank you, Benji, and thanks so much for all of you for being here today. So my data science journey started when I first saw graphs of infant mortality by race, and I realized that these disparities were not okay and that I wanted to be a part of that solution. And so I started out in public health, coming more from the math and biostatistics side, and I focused my training there. And so for undergrad, I pursued a math major, and I attended Spelman College and had a great experience there. I realized that I wanted to combine not only the data skills, but also leadership skills and being able to guide and equip others with the math skills that they needed to make an impact, whether they were in public health or any other field. And so I am fortunate to be doing that now as a doctoral student and as founder of my company, Rose Data Studio. And so from Spelman, I went to the Department of Biostatistics at UCLA with the goal of pursuing a PhD in biostats. However, my strong interest in interdisciplinary work and translating findings for broad audiences led me to earn my MS there, so my master's, and then pivot to start a PhD program in policy analysis. So I was there for a few years, and then I realized that I wanted to actually take some time off. So I took a leave of absence from my program so I could work and get a job in industry. And that was really eye-opening for me because I got to see that, as Yoni mentioned, these skills are transferable and translatable. And I realized that there were still some skills that I was missing to be able to do that effectively. And one of those is SQL or SQL, as Haley mentioned. It's a very important skill because in industry, you're responsible many times for going out and getting your data from this data warehouse that's storing information from all of these either transactions or in my case, the transactions were actually visits to health providers. So I worked in the healthcare industry for a little bit. And so those claims from all of those visits were the type of data that I worked with. And so being able to make that connection really excited me because I realized that there were probably a lot of other people who were looking to make similar connections and moving from more academic research into industry work. And I just wanted to be a part of that. And so I focused Rose Data on data visualization, data storytelling, and really thinking about building those plans for students to continue to cultivate their skills and land successfully in industry roles. So I guess the last thing I will share is that after I graduate, I hope to continue doing this work with Rose Data Studio. My dissertation is focusing on STEM education and really that transition point of going from your learning institution to your first role. So I'm excited to continue to support students in that space. And who knows where I'll end up in terms of, even adjunct roles where I could teach statistics in many different settings, which is really fun for me too, to see how people in business talk about statistics versus departments of psychology or analytics. So it's been really fun. And one of my faculty members who was recruiting us told us that, with statistics, you can play in anyone's backyard. And I've definitely found that to be the case.
All right, great. So our next panelist would be Brandon.
Hi, thanks. So my background too, I think, has been a quite indirect journey to data science. So I started in sociology, and in fact, not even in quantitative methods, but in doing interviews and ethnography. I was doing kind of intersectional research into also health disparities. And then from there, I started getting interested in things like the sociology of science and kind of how knowledge is produced. And that got me into social network analysis and actually archival research. And then the archival research got me into things like OCRing, images of documents, and natural language processing. Yeah, so that's kind of, and then that brought me, I think, to where I am now, so a data scientist. And at NORC, I focus kind of substantively on science and even a bit on the STEM education side. So my group has done things like work with the National Science Foundation to see how their funding programs impact the career trajectories of people who receive grants from them, and working with the CDC to figure out how to most effectively communicate information on mental health resources, like during COVID-19, or even actually working with synthetic biologists to produce a tool for synthetic biologists to kind of help. It was a recommender to provide them with easy access to relevant knowledge on the ethical and social implications of the work that they're doing. So kind of from that very much qualitative sociology background, I've kind of now work in the mostly science communication and science evaluation space, both doing research. My group does research on our own, and we work a lot, like I said, with federal agencies.
Fantastic. So thanks to you all panelists for your responses. And as we can see, these panelists have backgrounds from various areas of study. And as we can see, data science brings all these areas of studies together. And this indicates to us that no matter your background, you can actually get involved in data science. So moving on to our next question. And similarly, we have each panelist would have 3 minutes each. So beginning with Asya, how do you prepare yourself to be successful in data science, both as a professional or as a student?
Sure. I love this question. I found that I had to really redefine what success looked like for me, especially when I started my first job outside of academia. I would say success initially kind of looked like getting A's on all my statistics assignments and or trying to, make sure my code could run. But I realized when I was working, the collaborative skills were really what was important, and having an open mindset, because tools change, and companies sometimes might even say, we used to use SAS and now everyone's moving to R or Python. And so I think there's a great element of flexibility and just having a growth mindset to know that if you can teach yourself, how to learn anything, then I think you'll be well set up for success. And so I think another important thing to do is understand different types of roles. And one role that I didn't know about when I first got my job was actually data engineer. And they were responsible for making sure that all of the data from our healthcare plan members, appointments, whichever medical facility they went to, they made sure that that data came to us in a way that we could process and understand it on the analytics and reporting side. And I really appreciate them. Those are kind of like my heroes, because without them, I couldn't make the beautiful visualizations that I made. And so I think there's also this deep appreciation for teamwork and understanding, what everyone is doing across the data pipeline. And kind of knowing, not necessarily just knowing your place, but knowing where you really want to make an impact, I think can help you, especially when tools change or your code isn't quite working or your model's not converging. I think it helps you in those moments to just be reminded of the big picture. And so I would say to students starting out, really start to think, what is the big picture? Where was your data before it got to you, and where is it going after? And what is your kind of small part in that big chain of events?
All right, great. So next we have Brandon.
So I agree with all of that. That's all very important. And to that, I will add, I think, really being able to see the kind of substantive problem being, that your team or the group that you're working with is trying to solve, or the information, if you're providing analytics to someone, really kind of seeing that, they need to make a decision, and kind of being able to say, okay, this is like the technical statistical work, but it gives them this piece of information, which is what they need, to make a decision. And so I think that has been really important. And it really is kind of for everyone and all the different roles that Asia mentioned, right? So if you're working with a client and they need something, that's one perspective. But even if you're talking with a data engineer or a team of data engineers, right? Kind of understanding where they're coming from enough to, say, to kind of give them direction so they can help you. And so you can all kind of help folks. And so I think for me, one of the things, in addition to, I think teamwork is super important, is seeing the kind of substantive problem being tackled, and kind of how the information that the data science provides plays a role in that decision process.
Fantastic. So next we have Yoni.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the two other panelists. And I think, Asia, you said it really great. I'm just going to kind of piggyback off of that, which is, when you're getting into the data science world, or just in your career in general, it's really important to have an open mind. I personally was, I always knew that I liked science, engineering. I went straight to school, got the mechanical engineering degree. I was laser focused. And then I got out and I got into the aerospace world, which was something I always wanted. And literally after 2 years, it was like a rug pulled from underneath me, because not that bad, but I really just wasn't so satisfied as I thought I'd be. I think there was just a lot more out there for me to do. And it took me a long time to transition my career and change what I wanted to do. And then once I had that open mind, and I was able to kind of learn a little bit about business, learn a little bit about economics, learn about data science, and kind of think about how it can all come together. And I was at the beginning stages of data science too. It was really like when that term was kind of coined. And once I was able to break out of that mold and start having an open mind, the last thing I want to be right now is pigeonholed in something, which is, again, going back to data science being horizontally focused and transferable, very, very appealing to me. So being in a data science role, and honestly, right now I'm kind of more in management and leadership and those areas. So it keeps on growing from there. For me, that was very interesting for me. So when you're looking to go into data science, I would definitely keep an open mind, understand the fundamentals, get those down. There's no question, you got to know how to do that. but be prepared to be surprised by all the different challenges that come with different industries, different people you run into, the different roles, like you said, Asia. I think it's a fun world to be in, but you got to be, be ready for it, expect it, and just ready to learn as much as you can at any given time. And the other thing I'll agree with you too that you said, Asia, is that like learning how to learn is so important. I think I realized after I got my PhD that I was, again, laser focused on engineering, but what I found actually after I started looking to other areas is that I really learned how to learn. And so that took me to a lot of different places, and it made me realize that I can just jump into any book or any sort of area and just get excited to just bring on new knowledge, ask a lot of questions. And I think that hunger and curiosity will take you a long way.
All right, fantastic, great answers from our panelists. So we would move on to our next question, and panelists would have about 1 to 2 minutes to answer this question. And we would begin with Brandon on this one. So what groups or professional organizations should we join if interested in data science? How can we be involved in the data science community?
Yeah, so I think that the social aspect is of the profession is so important here, and I think meetups are a great place to start locally. It gets you embedded within the community, and once you have folks who care and know about, or even trying to learn the same thing that you're trying to learn, you can pose questions together, review each other's work and present to each other, and I think that can not only help build your skills and really kind of hone your craft, but then also potentially connect you to others and potential jobs and things like that. Professional societies, for certain, depending on exactly kind of the field you want to work in or the sector, it might matter. So like the American Statistical Association. Especially if you want to work kind of in or around the government, that's a very important professional association. But I would say, first kind of turn to your local meetups, or now that everything's virtual, just attend meetups. I attend meetups kind of all over virtually at this point. And I would say that if you're just trying them out, don't hesitate to try multiple ones and kind of see, I think, where you fit best. Because sometimes it really does take finding the kind of a good fit for a group of people to, for you to really kind of reap the benefits.
Our next panelist on this one is Yoni.
That's what I thought. Okay, thanks. No problem. So yeah, I think this is a tough one for me. I think you're probably on one of the best types of meetups you could be on right now. So I would say keep on coming back to these. This seems like a huge group of people all interested in a very similar thing, and getting the foundations of data science and building a network. It really, that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is incredibly important when you're getting into any sort of career and moving in that direction. And so I would say, think about industries you might be interested in. Think about problems you want to solve, and just let that guide you to the different types of meetups or groups you want to go to. And again, got to get the foundations of data science. There's no question about it. And there's a lot of different resources for that. But what will make you stand out when you're going on job interviews or thinking about what you want to do is having the data science foundations down pat, but also being passionate and interested in a problem that can be solved that no one has solved yet with data science.
All right, great. Thanks for your answer. And we move on to Asia.
Yeah, so I'll add on to what Brandon said. So I was a member of the American Statistical Association for many years, especially when I was a student in biostats. Now I'm looking more at associations related to STEM education. And then within associations, you can join specific working groups or kind of subgroups that focus on the tools and practices that you're interested in. And so I'll be kind of on the lookout for those data, thinking about data curriculum and data analysis within education. So I'm really excited about that. And then there's also for a few specific meetups and groups that I've been following and haven't quite had a chance to join any yet, but our studio. So I think about the software themselves, right? So our studio has meetups and they're pretty active on LinkedIn and promoting them. If you follow a few, there's quite a few folks just from the company and you can kind of follow or they'll add you on LinkedIn. So you'll get notified through when those meetups are happening. And then Tableau as well is a really active and vibrant community. I realized when I joined or kind of got to know about that software, this is back about 7 years ago, but it was just completely different from any other. I couldn't believe it that there are all these people so excited to talk about data. And when I was in LA, I went to a meetup kind of like downtown, and it was just really inspirational and exciting. And so it's fun to see what they have going on. And I think one of the great things about these meetups and activities is that, every time like new features come out, usually they're going to have something to kind of get you up and running and have tutorials for you to practice and get to see other people demonstrate and ask questions. And so that actually just happened earlier this afternoon with a new feature that our studio has. And so it's great to know that almost as soon as things get updated, there will be like a response in the community and you'll be able to participate in getting to know more about it.
All right, fantastic. Great answers from our panelists. So we move on to our last question we have here before we jump into audience questions. So with this question, all panelists have about 2 minutes to answer, and we will begin with Yoni. So thinking about the future of data science, how do you expect the field to innovate and adapt over the coming 5 to 10 years, or even longer than that?
Yeah, so I think it's evolved and adapted over the past 5 years quite a bit, and obviously I don't expect that to slow down. It's always going to be accelerating. I think some areas that I've seen change quite a bit that are going to be huge in the next couple of years is all the innovation around specific types of use cases that have some complex algorithms like vision or NLP. Those are the two big ones that come to mind right now. NLP is natural language processing. I think also what I've seen quite a bit of that separates the real valuable data scientists and organizations is when they take on more than just the data science skill set. They're Swiss Army knives. They know how to work from a software engineering standpoint. They know how to work from a data engineering standpoint. They can put models into production in a very seamless way and be able to refresh them in a very seamless way so it doesn't affect the user. So kind of taking those software development concepts and putting them into the data science space. And then also being very knowledgeable about all of the infrastructure and compute and storage and how to work with all the kind of foundations of what allow you to do data science can really put you in a different place. And I'm starting to see a lot of data scientists that are starting to master a bunch of areas that are on the periphery of data science while also being masters of the algorithm.
All right, fantastic. So next we have Asya again.
Awesome. Something I'm looking forward to seeing more of is role-based data training. And so I think there is kind of, as Yoni alluded to, in the past, there were almost these silos between kind of IT versus, business information or business intelligence. And now just seeing that come together and also seeing the professional development that's happening at companies to really support what people need and support that onboarding process and that kind of integration into the team based on, how they're going to be interacting with data. And then to really make it easier, if someone is interested in switching functions, that they know that they'll be able to go from one department to another and evolve their role to match their growing interests, and that within companies there'll be better support for actually doing that in ways that we might not have expected in the past. So I'm really excited to see that and to also think about that innovation that will continue to grow as people are more able to be fluid in making those kinds of changes.
All right, great. So we finally have Brandon.
So the thing I think I'm most excited about is I guess the further diffusion of data science into the federal government. So in particular, in response to like the Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. And as now more agencies are getting like chief data officers, and statistics has kind of always, I think, been big around and in the US government. But kind of as more kind of data science tools and software engineering, kind of makes its way into the government and they start being used, I think that's that's been started, and I think the next several years we'll only see the kind of further solidification of data science and kind of software engineering within the government.
All right, great. And thank you so much to our panelists for answering our prepared questions. So before we jump on to the audience questions, I'd like to pass it on to Lauren to do an audience poll.
Yeah, so we're going to try something new as part of this panel. What I'm going to do is launch a poll into you guys, the audience, and you respond. Let us know what question you most want to hear about next from our panelists. So I'm going to launch that right now and give you a couple seconds to respond, and then we'll take answers from each of our 3 speakers. It's great. I can see, oh, wow, you guys are really active. We're going to just give it a couple more seconds and then we'll hand it over to the speakers. All right, let's try to take it from here. Give it just a few more seconds. All right, here we go. So it looks like what we want to hear next from our speakers is, what do you know now that you wish you knew during your time at school as students? Asia, you're smiling, so I'm going to ask you to pick that one up and take it first.
Sure. My answer is that I would tell myself my path is unique and it's going to be an exciting journey, so I can relax and enjoy the process. I remember a time where I knew we had this kind of pre-quiz for a class I was taking, and I decided instead of going to the beach that I was going to try to study for this thing. And I just, first of all, was miserable. I did not even do well, so I should have just gone to the beach. But I think it also really reminded me to, as I look back, to play to my evolving strengths. I think at the beginning, I was very focused on the math part of it, which was so fun. But then I also realized there's so much more I could do. I don't have to be the best at deriving all these things. I can hire the team that's going to support that kind of work. And I can, focus on data viz and other aspects of project management. And so there's definitely more to life than the next quiz, especially one that doesn't count for your grades.
That's a great answer, keeping things in perspective. Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's what I have to say is very kind of much in line with that. And that's, again, yes, the foundations are important, but find a problem that you find particularly compelling and maybe for which you're uniquely qualified to be solving, and really kind of dedicate yourself to that, as opposed to, trying to keep up maybe with the newest, latest and greatest natural language processing kind of algorithm or something. I think really kind of positioning yourself as a leader and kind of what you feel compelled to do is really important.
That's great. And Yoni, what are we missing in this conversation so far?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing I would say is I went to school in a really cold area and now I live in Florida, and I would say just go somewhere warm. It's so much better. No, I think I agree with both of those. I think I mentioned it before in terms of my time at school. Really just go in with an open mind. I think the other thing I would say is that I realized that there's tons of other subject areas in addition to math and science that take a real analytical mind to kind of sort through that I didn't realize. And I think that you actually, I actually can provide like a different perspective coming from an engineering background. So I think just this like mixture of perspectives, this idea of thinking about things through different lenses and focusing on something that is going to be of interest to people in 3 to 5 years, rather than what was interesting 10 years ago.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And thank you to all of our amazing audience members for chipping in and sort of guiding the conversation. I'm going to hand things back over to Benjamin and Haley, and then maybe we can open up the floor to more of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists, for those amazing answers to the questions. Very insightful, very helpful. Great insights and pieces of advice that we can all incorporate into our journey with or in data science. So thank you all seriously so much for that. So I'd like to reshare the slides and do a bit more formal thank you. So we'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of this panel event. Like I said, special thank you to the panelists, of course, for sharing their insights and journeys with us all. Great tangible advice that we can all take into mind. And a virtual round of applause for our moderator, Benji, for leading the panel discussion and always being a team player, as well as our 5 facilitators. So we have Faru, who leads the outreach team, and she's been overseeing the chat. Lauren, as we just heard from, who's been screen sharing and live streaming. Pritika, our great student volunteer, who you'll hear from soon during our post-panel Q&A facilitation. Macy, who couldn't make it on the call today, but will be writing a blog post for this event. And the Hub's executive director, Florence Hudson, who's helped in really every aspect of this event and the series as a whole. And finally, thank you each for your hard work, collaboration, and contributions to making this event and the series so valuable. Thanks to all of you who tuned in today from all around the world and who'll be watching the recording later. This literally would not be a thing without you all. We really hope this panel was super helpful and rewarding. And please keep the conversations going through our Slack channel and all the other ways you can keep in touch with the Hub. So yeah, let's keep the collaboration going. Feel free to sign up for our newsletter with that bit.ly on the screen. As you can see, connect with us via social media. Our LinkedIn is in the Hub's name. It's Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. So also follow us on Twitter at data_core, Instagram at any Big Data Hub, and join our Slack channel. We'll have a recording of this event up soon on our YouTube channel. So we encourage you to subscribe to our channel for further updates via the bit.ly in the right corner. And after the event, there'll be a Zoom poll. So please make sure to fill that out with feedback on today's panel event and input on future events. So now we'll be transitioning into our post-panel Q&A session. We have a bit more time. We're not going to start at 4 because it's 3:43 p.m. Eastern. So we hopefully will have more time to answer more of your questions. So the attendees have the opportunity to have their questions answered by today's panelists. Benji and Pritika will pose any unanswered questions from the Q&A chat box to the panelists for them to answer freely. So let's start off with Benji to pose the first question from that Q&A chat box.
All right, great. So this first question is a question which is very common amongst a lot of people who attend these events. And the question is, how difficult is the transition into data science when you don't have a strong background in statistics or computer science? And this question is open to all the panelists, so you can share anything.
Yeah, so I'll start. One of my colleagues actually had, when I worked at the health plan, she had a background in medical coding, and she'd worked as a medical assistant at an urgent care facility. And so it's interesting because I think there's, and Brandeis Marshall is someone who talks about this, there's data skills that you almost don't even know sometimes that you have are data skills. And that context that you use to be familiar with the data can also really help you as you're moving into a role. And so I think I would say it's important to think about the subject matter expertise that you have and to consider if you want to move into a role that's related. And so for my peer, moving into a role that was focused on healthcare outcomes and healthcare quality measures really aligned well because she helped collect some of that data and she was involved in the billing, and we saw those codes on the other end and use them in our analytics. And so by understanding the capturing process, understanding how those codes work together, she actually brought a new perspective to our work that I mean, when she would see code, she would say, oh my gosh, this, these don't match up. This doesn't make sense. Let me go back and, talk to billing and talk to coding and, sort things out. And so I would say too, to remember that there's different kind of outputs that different teams work on. And so, for example, my team was really mostly focused on reporting out. So really summary statistics tables. Of course, we had to do a lot of kind of SQL and coding to get that data set up. But at the end of the day, we're reporting on percentages and rates and things. And then there's also teams that kind of go into predicting things. And so you might need a little bit more of that math and statistics background there. So I would say to really think through what are the kind of core needs for different roles that you might be interested in, what sounds like a good entry point for you, and then to kind of think about your progression of where do you want to be, 2 to 3 years after landing, your first role. And so those are kind of the ways I would start to think about kind of getting your foot in the door. But as has been mentioned in some of the comments, it's also thinking about what is that training that you're going to do. And so I'm sure the speakers can other speakers can speak more to that. But I'm thinking as you're approaching the roles, just really thinking through what kinds of processes are being used and how can your prior knowledge really inform the way you'll approach it as a data professional.
If I could ask you all a question related to that. Thank you, Asia. There was a gentleman who joined in on one of these panels earlier this year, and he was a serial entrepreneur and he was changing jobs and he was going to get his MBA at Southern University. And so he wanted a little mentoring. So he and I chatted and we talked about something similar to this. He doesn't have a strong data science background. He doesn't have a strong computer science background. He has to hire programs to do stuff for him, but he wants to get into data science and he was wondering how to do it. So we talked about data visualization and we talked about Tableau, like you said, because maybe you can talk a little bit about what data visualization is, because that's, I think, when you get to see what the data is saying, right? There's graphical user interface, and there are data engineers and data analysts that work with you, and there are all sorts of algorithms behind that. But there are different layers of this. It's kind of like, I know the plane is going to fly versus doing finite element modeling like Yoni and I used to do in aerospace engineering. Like you just know if it's going to, then you figure out if it's going to fly, but you care if it's going to fly. So maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of the different levels of getting involved in data science, because you don't have to be an algorithmicist to be able to leverage data science. I think that's part of what y'all were saying, is that I call it like a gazenta. It goes into everything, data science, but there are different layers of touching it and using it. Can you talk a little bit about the data visualization side?
Yeah, sure. I could take that one. That's a great point, Florence, because when we work with different businesses, we were originally so focused in on the data science work. And then what we found was that all of these businesses, in order to get that to work and to build a holistic picture of what's going on with their customers, et cetera, you need all these other facets to it. And so we were talking about data engineering before. There's also something called data governance, which is a huge piece of what's going on in large organizations. And that's all about having control over your data, but also making it accessible to everybody in the environment in a safe and secure way. There's things called data catalogs, which you can get deeply involved with, building and creating data catalogs for the organization and for different companies so that they can dive in and have like a catalog of what data is available. Then, as you were mentioning, there's the data visualization piece, which is really where a lot of data scientists in the early days started. There's always been dashboards and kind of viz tools. And the big difference, I think, is that usually data visualization is looking backwards in time at what has happened before in a very, crystal clear way by creating charts and graphs and line charts and bar charts. Whereas data science is typically associated with predicting what's going to happen in the future based on the past data. And the predictions is really where the algorithms come in. So if you want to get close to data science and be very involved in the data science world, without getting into the algorithms, data visualization is a perfect place to be. You get your hands dirty with the data. You're able to create visualizations that are used right away by a lot of different people, and people make decisions off of these visualizations. And there's a lot of work going on right now in how to, I talked about data governance, there's also reporting governance, because these reports and visualizations have gotten out of control at a lot of organizations as well, where everyone's just creating any report they want, and then they may have the same visualization for the same sort of metric, but the metrics are actually different because the data is different underneath the hood, and you got to kind of fix that. So there's just a lot of work in building these visualizations. There's a lot of work in using the visualizations to make decisions, and then also governing and making them clean and crystal clear across an organization.
Wow, you really paint a really wide picture of all the cool ways people can get involved. Thank you so much, everyone. That's great.
No problem. Yeah, there's a lot.
There is, which is fun. Pritika, do you want to ask a question? I know you've been graciously waiting in the background.
Yeah, of course. So another question that came in is, how difficult is it to transition into data science when you don't have a strong background in statistics or computer science?
Right. And then there's the one on Python, maybe. Is that the one that you copied over? How much?
Yes. So
let's go to that one.
Yes. So we had another question come in regarding Python. So somebody asked, how much does someone need to know about Python, SQL, and R programming to feel confident about applying for a job in data science?
Like, do you just have to know how to spell it? Do you not have to know how to spell it? R is just one letter. You know, what if you don't know about any of these things? Like, how do you get started? We actually have some entry-level stuff on the NSDC website under Learner Central, so we'll put that into the chat again. But does anyone have any advice on that?
Yeah, so I'd say I kind of go back to the processes, and so as Andy mentioned, like the use cases. So how are these tools actually used by the team? So I'd maybe conduct informational interviews or kind of go to these meetups to start to try to get a sense. For example, if you're in, well, I know R the best, so I'll kind of speak from that. But if you're in R, which packages are people using? What are they doing with them? How does the data come to them before they do their work? And what does it look like after? What are some of the kinds of outputs that they're getting? In terms of SQL, again, just depends. I knew for my purposes, I needed to be able to just connect to my data, kind of get the right dates for the claims I was looking at, the right member IDs. And so again, just thinking for the reporting purposes or the analytic purposes of the team, what are some things that are actually going to be happening? And there's a lot of great kind of resources that are out there to help teach you and go over the fundamentals. There's really, I love lots of people on LinkedIn who share just kind of their perspectives on what defines intermediate versus basic SQL. But I would say if you're not really sure what those kind of use cases or processes look like, I think just to talk to people to get an idea. That way, when you go to choose a course or something that you want to study, you'll have an idea of how you're going to be using that material once you're finished with it.
Good advice.
So I'll add that I think on all the teams with which I've worked, I think SQL has been kind of a common language that folks needed to have at least some proficiency in. And then on my current team now, people typically come in with either some knowledge of R or Python. But again, I think as we talked about earlier, the ability to kind of teach yourself these things and pick them up is the most important, because my team works in both. And so even though folks typically come in being proficient in one or the other, they wind up learning to be proficient in both. Yeah, so I think as long as I feel like comfortable in a language and at the point where you can teach yourself how to learn new things, especially as even these languages become out of date, then I think you'll be set up for success.
Great advice. And we put the Learner Central link in there. You can actually find some beginner Python, R, and SQL materials in there. So you can see what you think about it. You don't have to pay to go to a class. You can just get started and see what you think. Go ahead, Benji. Do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, so the next question we have is, How competitive are students from liberal arts college in the field of data science? So from this question, I understand people who are not studying stuff very related to data science, how likely are they to get into the field of data science in terms of finding a job?
Well, you're looking at someone who came from a liberal arts school, so it definitely can happen. But I was in the engineering group. But I think this is kind of a similar question to the one before, where I think it's like, if you're not really in the statistics and data science space, how easy is it to get in? And I think, like Florence was talking about, there's getting purely into the algorithm parts. I think there's some table stakes there that you have to know the foundations of statistics and machine learning algorithms. There's no question. I mean, that's the job. And so I think if you've got the mind for that and the determination to learn it, there's plenty of resources out there that we're talking about. If you want to be in the data science space, but maybe not the one writing the algorithms, as we talked about, there's plenty of other areas that a liberal arts, education and a drive and a passion for the space, you could definitely get in right away. And there's tons of resources out there in all these other areas like data engineering, data visualization, data governance, even leadership in the data science space. You can get involved in a number of different ways. And I think a liberal arts education, I can vouch for it. It's great. You learn a ton about a lot of different things. You have a well-rounded education that you can bring to any situation that you may come across in your career.
Yeah, and I second that as well, coming from a liberal arts institution.
Yeah, and on that note, maybe we can see if you have any additional information. Another question here is, what college degree would be great for a career in data science? Sounds like you said almost all of them, but
yeah, I think it just kind of depends on what within data science you find interesting and you want to do, because as Yoni and Asya said earlier, there's so many different parts of data science that. Yeah, it really just depends. Do you like to be the person, for instance, like you said with data visualization, really trying to communicate the kind of technical material to decision makers, right, in kind of an actionable way? Or do you like to be the person really focusing on the algorithms or the data engineering or building APIs and different things like that? I have people on my team who come from a bunch of different areas and who do a bunch of, they don't do a single thing. Some of them are kind of more software engineering. Some of them focus more purely on causal inference. And I think actually most of them have come from the social sciences. So I don't think there a priori there's kind of any barrier. It just depends on exactly kind of what you want to do, and then you will have to kind of go from there.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a question that I used to get. I used to be pre-med actually in undergrad, and I used to get this question a lot of, which major should I do to get into med school? And I hope now that question has been answered, that you can choose any major for med school. It's about the MCAT and getting the core classes that you need, your requirements done. And so I think about going into data science in the same way. How are you going to demonstrate your skills through different courses or a portfolio that you have, regardless of your other interests, because we can also have many interests. I'm interested in photography, which I think also kind of influences and informs my data visualization. And so it's okay to have many passions and to pursue that as well. So just definitely keep that in mind.
Great, pretty good. You want to ask another question?
Yeah, sure. So another question we have over here is, Asya mentioned that growth mindset and ability/flexibility to learn new skills over time is important. So I'm wondering how to get the most out of my current educational and job experience. What do you think makes someone most likely to be picked out of a pool of candidates for a data science job?
Yeah, so I think to answer that question, I can kind of think through some jobs that I wasn't selected for. I remember one organization asked me about kind of my working style and how do I keep track of things, and when we have lots of projects going on. And at the time, coming from school, there are kind of only a few things I was working on at one time. And so I think people are kind of curious to understand how are you going to fit into the workflows of that team. So for example, if you're on a team that gets lots of data requests for reporting from other units, they really want to know how you're going to be able to be organized and accountable to that stream of work. So that might be very important. Others might also have a strong focus on communicating and reporting to people in different departments. And so to show that you can speak to that particular competency of that role is really important. And so I remember one role was really excited that I was so I was so thrilled to focus on data literacy and communication, because they said, oh, great, we talk with everyone at the company. We really want to make sure that you're capable of doing that. And so I think it, again, coming down to the function, how does that team work within the organization? And then there are some teams that are kind of more research and development, kind of with a little more insular. There's so many different kinds of team cultures. And so I think people are looking to really consider, how do you mesh with the culture of that team? Is it going to be a good fit for you? If you're someone who's definitely more interested in, briefing the C-suite, is that more insular role going to be the best place for you to shine and to show your skills? So I'd say that's kind of a two-way street as well. So I'd love for all of you to consider and really think, how does this role fit into the culture of the company, and what you can also ask if you do get to that first or second round, what are characteristics of someone who would succeed or do really well in this role, and hear that answer and think, does that align with my goals and my personality?
Great. Benji, you want to ask another question?
Yeah, so this is a quite contentious question, and the question is, while Excel is useful, do you think businesses should make a push to not use it for advanced statistics?
I can take that one. So Excel is never going to go away, in my opinion. I mean, I personally believe it's a fantastic tool, one of the best programming tools out there. It's very easy to use. It's visual. You can see everything. And for us, when we're doing data science projects, it's kind of like the last mile, if you will, where you're doing all this really deep work inside of the programming languages and then the visualization tools, and then you get a bunch of output that you need to quickly wrangle with some output from something else somewhere else that you need to pull together and come up with a quick visualization to work with your customer, to work with your teammates on. And it's always there. Now, should you be doing deep statistical analysis in Excel? I think there's a limit for sure where you want to stop it, because it slows down quite a bit, and there's a lot of room for error in Excel, because you're just you kind of moving things around on the spreadsheet rather than working in small bits of code. So you got to pick and choose. There's probably rules of thumb that you can think of, but there's no real hard rules on whether, where you should stop Excel and move into something a little bit more sophisticated. But I think my takeaway is that it's always going to be there for a number of reasons. And it is a great tool.
Ritika, you want to ask the next question?
Yep, sure. Would you recommend being a generalist or a specialist?
Maybe it depends on where you are in your career trajectory.
So I can say this. I like with everything, I feel like I'm going to say it depends on what you want to do and what type of position you want. With my team, we tend to hire more generalists than people who specialize in particular things. Even the people who are more specialized, I think still have a pretty solid grasp of kind of the broad range of methods to which our team will be exposed. So, but that's can very much differ depending upon your sector you work in or you want to work in, and the type of data science position. I don't personally think there's kind of a single answer to this, because it just gets at the diversity of data science, and the fact that like the sociologist in me says like data science is actually not like it's a very, very kind of ambiguous label. And so like we've been saying, it really is kind of, what specifically are you interested in, or are you trying to do, or what position is a company hiring for? And so I myself and my team tend to be more generalist, but being a specialist certainly has its roles and would be better for many positions.
I'll add an example to that. So if you think about working at a healthcare plan, as I did, in thinking about the focus right now on healthcare equity and health equity and outcomes across members, you could think about how there might be some more generalist roles that are focused on kind of standard reporting that's kind of almost always done. And then there might be specialized teams that are focusing on building specific predictive algorithms or other things, or working with kind of new clients, or if the business decides to kind of start a new product or service, that they might need a specialized team to kind of deploy in that space. And so I think too, especially in the business world and all over, it's sometimes you want to people think about shifting their workforce based on the needs, based on important trends, or if there is a new something kind of new that's happening. Or for example, at health plans, I actually think about governing bodies, for example, or institutions or organizations that they're accountable to. So for example, the NCQA is, focuses on accrediting these different health plans. And so if they say, hey, health equity is really important to us right now, then every plan has to start thinking, how are we going to do this? And so if you want to kind of come in as a specialist to say, okay, I work with these particular types of data in these ways to answer these kinds of questions, and there might be an opportunity for you kind of as that time arises. But then kind of when another new thing happens, there might be opportunities for others with different skills. And so I think it's good maybe to have a thing that you kind of focus on and hold closely. But as Brandon said, you might be asked to play other roles and to work on other aspects as well.
Very good point. Who wants to ask the next question, Benji or Pritika?
Yeah, I can take that. So one question we have here is, and this would be relevant to people who may have been involved in the hiring process or anything closer to that. Can relevant courses completed in websites such as Coursera, edX verify proficiency in data science skills?
I can take this. I am always, if students, for instance, don't have a lot of internship or kind of experience in a data science position, then I really value just seeing example work, or personal projects, or completed course projects even. So I think that these certification courses can help lead to that, but I actually think either in conjunction with those certifications, or potentially depending upon the exact course design, arising from that, that the kind of the real payoff is having an example of kind of work that you've done and you can really showcase. And so I do think they can add value if they help you do that in some way. Again, either by equipping you with the skills, or having that be like a capstone project or something. But yeah.
That's interesting, because what I hear often is they like to see how you think through a problem, right? Because when you're doing data science, you're trying to leverage the data to accomplish something, right? So if you're looking for, health inequities as an example, as we were talking about, and, why is it like that? Where does it start? Where is the problem? How do you determine that? So I think that the course information is important, but I think they really want to see too how you kind of think through a problem. Is that fair, Brandon?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think I really like to see people say, here's this problem or this question, that is important, and kind of exactly kind of thinking through that. Here's the data. Here's why I needed to do what I needed to do with the data. Here's the type of model that I chose and why that was appropriate. And because I needed this piece of information to be able to answer the question or something like that. I think that's exactly it. Being able to kind of see that someone is able to connect kind of all of the technical parts of the data science work with the substantive upshot or decision or problem. Yeah.
And Asia, the very inspiring way you started out by saying, I looked at, these mortality rates of babies, I was like tingling when you said that, thinking about it. And you knew what problems you wanted to try to solve. You knew what problems you were going to look for, right? And then you want to try to figure them out. So I think that's an example of that too.
Yeah, I would agree. And to Brandon's point, to kind of add on to that thinking, when you're working on these teams, there's often times where you're reviewing each other's code and having to talk through your process. And so that's a very important part of the role, to be able to understand. For me, for example, I would say, okay, I use SAS up until this point, then I brought the data into Tableau to do these things, and then here's what I was aiming to output. And so I think to not just say, hey, I completed these courses, but then to now say, okay, for example, the way I used my SQL course was to say, oh, well, I know you all use SAS, and SAS has proc SQL. And so that's how I'm going to be implementing SQL here. And, you use that to connect to your database and to start your dashboard processes. And so just to actually know how that tool is going to fit into the workflow, I think is really powerful. And I think some of these things just come with time. And again, talking with people, getting to understand kind of the daily or monthly, or in my case, quarterly processes that we would engage in terms of reporting, to understand how will you take, session 3 of that class that you took and apply it to your work.
Very good advice. So Pritika, is it your turn now? So I think asking the question about healthcare data science would be good, because I think Asia has a lot of passion in that area.
Yeah, sure. So question we got on that topic is, how likely is somebody with either a BBA in economics or BBA in information systems degree able to work in a healthcare data science field?
Oh yeah, I could think about kind of all my colleagues across teams. So we had some that focused more on like the financial kind of modeling and prediction of how much did we, think we were going to spend on members in any given month, versus us looking more at the healthcare outcomes. For example, HEDIS values specifically, or STARS values in Medicare. So I guess if you just even sit back and think, what happens after someone, when someone goes to an appointment, all the medical codes and things that are generated for billing purposes, as well as the kind of caring purposes, where does all that data go? And I think what I would say to anyone who's considering this is just to kind of follow the data. Which data seems really interesting to you? Is it the data that's more on the back end? Are you interested in maybe working at the health system itself? Are you interested in the different EHR software like Epic and others? Because there's plenty of roles there. Or are you interested in more on the population health side? I think it's really fun to kind of explore. And I'll put a link in the chat to kind of a role explorer in health information sciences to help you kind of think about that.
We could add that to the NSDC website too, to our Career Central. Thank you, Asia. Benji, would you like to ask the last question in the Q&A, and then we can go to the last question in the chat, maybe, Pritika?
Yep. So our last question here is from someone saying, I started my data science journey in June, mainly through datacom.com. But now I'm reading the Introduction to Statistical Learning textbook. I'm a finance major, but I've been studying data science on my own when I have extra time. I don't have the time to double major across colleges. What advice would you have for someone in my position moving forward in data science?
So I can start here. I would say, in line with, I feel like what I keep saying. So apologies if I'm getting redundant here, but it really kind of, I think, depends on what you find compelling within data science. I actually in the last year or so have gotten a lot more into time series modeling. And there's a lot of finance folks in data science who use R for time series modeling and generating predictions and forecasts. And so I actually would say that like you could potentially be in a large part already there. I think again, it kind of, if you like finance and you like R, you can there's that's a lot of finance related data science. And so I think it kind of, what exactly I'm trying to say here, exactly what else was in the question, but if there are other skills that you kind of if you're looking at positions and you see positions that you find interesting, and they have other skills, then maybe you could work towards that. But if you personally find finance really interesting, then I think keep doing what you're doing and maybe just try to see what other people in finance, financial data science are doing.
Very good. And I'll just answer the new question in the chat while you look at the one that was in the chat, Pritika. So in the Q&A, any resources to help learn how to use and navigate Python, R, and SQL? So I already answered a question that we have materials in NSDC in the programming area, but Kumel, I can actually answer your question with that, and I can put it in the chat so everyone can see it too. And actually, are there any other resources, Brandon or Asia, that you would like to mention to help them learn how to use and navigate Python, R, and SQL?
Yeah, I'll mention the Coursera course that I took, which was SQL for data science, which I thought was really beneficial. And then in terms of R, I love working through the R for Data Science book, which you can find for free online. And you can also audit any Coursera course for free. So those are two that I personally use. And I know there's a ton out there, but I think because of that, it's always helpful to get personal recommendations of what were beneficial to others.
Yeah, I think I second the personal recommendations. I think there's so many materials out there, that it sounds like the hub has kind of a curated set of resources, and so I think that's a great place to look. And then when I like the kind of RStudio related resources, and then for me, Python, I picked up, even though I used Python, I think, as my kind of primary coding language at this point, I picked it up pretty piecemeal at first. So I started learning, I came to Python through learning how to do network analysis, and then kind of NLP with like Spacey. And so the Spacey developers have good resources for Spacey. And in doing so, I've like followed them on Twitter. I actually think Twitter is a great data science resource if you want to learn and stay up to date with data science. I actually can't recommend anything better than Twitter, I think. Yeah, you follow, I think when you get these personal recommendations and you find a course that you like, follow those people, look for other content that they've put out, and just kind of do it that way. I think to kind of, find what matches your learning style and stick with that.
Very good. And I just put a link to the Python, R, and SQL learning materials on the NSDC website into the chat and into the Q&A answer. Pritika, you want to take our last question? And that should be an interesting one.
Yep. So we've got another question in the chat box, and it is, what is the typical structure of a data scientist / data analyst interview?
And then they probably want to know how to nail it, would be my guess, but they probably like to know what to expect.
Sure. So I'll speak to mine. So I know there's, I guess I'll start by saying, I know there's some that tend to have coding interviews. And there's some that don't have coding interviews. I tend to go for the ones that don't. And I also get a little stressed out by like exams and things. So I really focus, for me at least, and the teams that was hired on. The first one, actually, I was hired through a contract to hire arrangement. And so actually a recruiting company found me and brought me in to be on contract for 6 months. And so I just had, after kind of screening with that recruiter, I spoke directly with the hiring manager. And so the things that I wanted, that I focused on, I kind of knew, well, what kinds of metrics are they working with? And so since it was in the healthcare space, I was already familiar with quality reporting. I was like, okay, I need to know about HEDIS. I need to know about your workflow. What software do you use? And then I think to also speak to your interests. So I remember asking, do you have a Tableau license? And when they said yes, I was like, okay, I think this could, work out. I was really excited about that. And then also to ask, just how is the team growing? Who are the other kind of members of the team, and getting to know them, and how you would fit into the team overall. So I think the other thing I would say is kind of knowing, so again, I kind of mentioned the processes that some teams have. So if you're analytics, sometimes you might get requests from other teams. So I think it could be important to know about that. And so just trying to get a sense of also asking, what does success look like here? But I think you'd want to know that there's a good match in terms of the tools and maybe that learning curve. There's always going to be an adjustment period, but knowing that, for example, if you really aren't interested in Python for whatever reason, then maybe you don't want to join that particular team, but maybe there's other teams that are really focused more on R or other things. And so even within companies, there's variety across teams and what tools they're using. And so I'd say, again, just being true to your interests, because there will be tough days, or things just aren't going right, and you have to really lean on each other. And so knowing that you've worked to at least find that good match as best you can, I think are the things that keep you going in those times.
And Aisha, that's really cool advice, because I'm thinking, like, you may go in for one job interview and they're like, oh, we do this and this, and you might say, well, actually, I love Tableau. And then I go, oh, well, you know what? They're actually hiring too. And if you didn't say that, you may not have found out about it, and they might not have found out about you as an opportunist for that area, right? That's really cool. So speak up for yourself, right? Brandon, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so we don't have I think as formal of like a whiteboard kind of test or kind of anything formal. We have a mix of it. It depends on, again, the exact position and what the position entails. But when we bring folks out, we typically have them come for half or a full day, again, depending upon the position. And if it's frequently, we'll have people give a presentation. Again, so kind of they can showcase that they understand, here's a problem, and here, and kind of showing us how they thought through and resolved the problem, or got the information that they need. And in doing so, understand the different, whatever data science methods that they're, wanting to show proficiency in. And then we'll also have kind of technical questions to make sure people understand, if it's, an NLP, if it's a position focused on NLP, to make sure folks kind of understand the types of NLP methods we'll be working with. Again, I speaking for myself and my team, we definitely understand that people have exposure, to whatever they've worked with, and so I care more that people kind of thoroughly understand what they've done, and the tools that they've used in the past, kind of both what the tools do and when to use the tools, and then because in showing that you kind of understand through and through what you've done, and kind of it convinces me that when we expose you to new things, that you will have the kind of right intuitions and be able to ask the right types of questions to teach yourself these new methods, or a new programming language. Because again, like no one can, data science just includes so many different things. So no one can be an expert in everything. And I don't think going into the interviews, you should be stressed out if you aren't. I think for me and the way that we work, it really is kind of, if you can showcase that, you understand, what you've done and have kind of good kind of justifications for, when you would want to use that. And again, connecting it back to, like for us in the presentation, to the problem, like why is this an important thing to be doing? I think that's what impresses me.
Very interesting. So people don't want to leave, so we have a few more questions. So Benji, would you like to ask the next one at the top of the Q&A about asking how many hours the company expects you to work?
Yeah. So the question is, does it make sense to ask how many hours a company expects its workers to be occupied with the company's project? Is there a 24/7 implicit assumption? Can one give off the image of the lacking motive, impetus, or zest for the job? How about professional development opportunities? Is that a question that makes sense to ask or request employees to provide?
So I'm very opinionated in this with this question, and I think that you 100% want to get this information because I think it gets back to what you want in your job. In data science, there are definitely jobs that will expect you to be available, whenever. And there are others, like my team very much respects and encourages folks to respect their, professional and personal life boundary. And so I think that's the case. And professional development too, I think is very important. NORC takes it very seriously for our employees and provides opportunities. But I know that, or rather, this might not be, kind of the same in just like the kind of work-life boundary that might not. I'm lucky in that, I've been at NORC since I received my PhD. But I would definitely advocate that people find out this information.
I'd say that kind of overall time within a week, and then even thinking about how your particular team's time is valued. So for example, when do you have focus time to just kind of sit and work through code and solve and do deep thinking versus when are you expected to be engaged in meetings? Is your time protected to any degree? Is it kind of common practice to put blocks on your calendar when you're like, hey, this thing wasn't working yesterday, I've got to start in the morning, I'm just going to block out, from 9 to noon to work on it. And how can those boundaries be communicated? One of my friends shared this really great job posting with me last week, and it stated that, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, people get to make their own schedule, but then on Tuesdays and Thursdays that they should be available for collaborative work. So that's when they tend to have their meetings or tend to, set those times for people to come together. And I think especially in these types of roles, yes, we need to come together to understand, the goals of, whatever kind of analysis we're doing, but then we need the time to sit and think about it and to, struggle with R at times and get through those error messages and ask our teammates, have you seen this before? And, to really sort and work through that technical aspect of it. And so I think also the cadence of the day or the week within working hours is also something to get a good sense of in the interview.
Very nice. So we only have 2 minutes and now people are asking more questions. But so there's a question here. And you talked about a contract position, and Brandon, I don't know if you've been in a contract position before, but Asia, they're asking, would you recommend joining data science on a contract position? How are they usually structured? Are you usually working on one specific project? I think it depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd say it depends. So my contract was actually to, become a full member of the team eventually. And so they just tended to bring in technical talent this way when they were thinking about expanding the number of full-time folks in those positions. And so I was a member of the team like just about anybody else. The only difference was my paycheck came through the contracting agency versus the organization itself. And then once I got hired on full-time, that switched. As did my health insurance and other things. benefits. So benefits were a little bit different. So that's one thing. But the other one, kind of being more of an independent contractor, that's also something I, have experience with just through my business. And so in those cases, it depends, if you have a retainer agreement, you may be brought in for, over time to do many things, or you might just have one project that you're working on for a set time. And so those contracts can have whatever terms, are needed to meet the business need.
Very cool. Well, I'm sensitive to our wonderful panelists who've given us so much of their time. There are still a couple of questions, but I would encourage anyone to put them in the Slack channel, which you can get to by going to the NSDC website, and they've been put into the chat before. But Haley, I'd like to hand it back to you as our leader to wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot thank you panelists enough for joining us today. You really provided a wide range of insights, from where to start with data science to like where data science can really play into like your professional field. So thank you so much for your amazing insights and advice with that. And thank you for all who tuned in with the amazing questions. We hope that this was very valuable to each of you. Thank you to the team for joining in and helping facilitate this great event. And yeah, thank you all for just joining us today.
And thank you, Haley, for leading us as always.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.